College in Decorah, Iowa, since 1861, an environment for academic excellence. And Bob...
The site of tonight's Democratic debate in Dallas.
Good evening. We're here at the ABC affiliate in Dallas, WFAA, because in several hours the remaining Democratic candidates will join us here for a nationally televised debate which to all intents and purposes puts them together for the last time before Super Tuesday, next Tuesday, when 11 states hold primaries or caucuses. And we say the remaining candidates because the senator from Nebraska, Bob Kerrey, has decided to retire from the field. We're going to begin tonight with his departure. Here's ABC's Jack Smith.
Today, speaking to friends and supporters, Bob Kerrey was confident.
The only unelectable politician running for president of the United States is George Bush.
Today, Bob Kerrey was committed.
For me, the fight simply is going to move on to new arenas.
Today, Bob Kerrey was humorous.
Post-mortems? Are you... Are you a journalist or a mortician here?
In other words, today, Bob Kerrey was everything he'd failed to be on the campaign trail. On paper, he looked like just the sort of new Democrat to beat George Bush, a Vietnam War hero and a businessman who'd be immune from the weaknesses that Republicans had successfully exploited in past Democratic nominees. But Kerrey was inexperienced and his campaign sometimes disorganized. Furthermore, his main issue, health care, was stolen by everyone else. And too often, he was a rambling and incoherent stump speaker who failed to articulate a message.
Voters didn't understand what they were voting for. There were too many different things, and there wasn't one thing that they understood about Bob Kerrey. That was his problem.
As he headed back to Nebraska, the man who looked so good on paper became a campaign casualty because he failed to connect where it counts, with voters. Jack Smith, ABC News, Washington.
That observation of not quite knowing who or what they might be voting for was a problem for Kerrey ever since he rather impulsively, many believe, got into the race. There are so many questions which remain unresolved for voters about many of the candidates. In the case of Bill Clinton, our exit polls in Georgia on Tuesday night told us that 21% of the Democrats are still concerned about his record on the draft during the war in Vietnam. And in the case of Paul Tsongas, 19% said they are worried that the cancer he had in the early 80s could return. We put that question to our medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson.
Just 6 years ago, Paul Tsongas was critically ill with a lymphoma, cancer of the lymphatic system, which is essential for fighting disease and infection.
In December of 1985, he had been very sick for several months, and if he did not respond quickly and completely to the therapy being instituted at that time, he probably would have died within several months.
The treatment proposed for Tsongas at Boston's Dana-Farber Cancer Institute is known as autologous bone marrow transplant. Some of the patient's own bone marrow is first removed and stored for safekeeping. The rest of the marrow is destroyed when the patient then receives 5 days of intensive chemotherapy and radiation designed to kill all cancer cells in the body. After this treatment, the stored bone marrow is given back to the patient as a transfusion. For Tsongas, the treatment worked. There is no doubt about his current general health. He swims every day, and doctors have placed no limits on any activity.
For a 51-year-old American, one would have to put him way ahead of the pack in terms of cardiovascular status, general underlying health. He's in exuberant health.
But could Tsongas's cancer return? Half of all lymphoma patients who go through bone marrow transplants will have a relapse in the first year or two. But current data indicates that if the patient makes it past those critical years, like Paul Tsongas, the chance of recurrence drops rapidly toward zero.
He has remained free of disease for so long, now 5.5 years since his transplant. I think the possibility remains, but it must be extremely remote.
Senator Tsongas now undergoes regular checkups, including a very sophisticated new test that can detect just one cancer cell in every 1 million normal cells. So far, everything is negative, which means that Paul Tsongas can probably be declared cancer-free with more certainty than any other candidate. Dr. Timothy Johnson, ABC News, New York.
The next 5 days in this campaign are as rigorous as any the candidates have faced up until now, with so many primaries producing so much potential support. You let down now at your peril. Which brings us to the next big prize, Texas. The candidate who wins here, Republican or Democrat, gets a lot of publicity and a lot of delegates to support him at the political convention this summer. And Texans need to be convinced. First, this is not New Hampshire. The landscape here is marked by modest signs of recovery. There hasn't been much campaigning here, and a lot of Texans are just beginning to focus. Not far from Dallas, the mayor of Flower Mound, Gary Acker.
We're probably inclined to be more concerned about the local scene than we are the national scene.
A lot of people here believe that all the candidates cut and fit their campaign message too much to suit the local scene.
They kind of say what they have to say
what they
whatever
have to say to get whatever vote they need to get done.
Moreover, the mud-covered governor's race here 2 years ago has left many Texas citizens thinking that perhaps all politicians are a lesser form of life.
Well, you're an easy sell, I'll tell you.
Linda Price lives in Grapevine, Texas. She owns a gift shop. Her husband, John, is a pilot.
I'm tired of our politicians being laughingstocks. I'm tired of character being reflected to the rest of the world that isn't necessarily the American ethic.
In 1992, this place which George Bush calls home is his to lose. Still, for the Texas vote, he and the other candidates will have to battle their way through some pretty heavy-duty cynicism. Phyllis Brown works for the IRS.
You know, they all say one thing when they're trying to get elected, and then they forget it 2 years down the road. And then they all of a sudden remember it 7 or 8 months before election time.
Among the Democratic candidates trying to make an impression here, the polls suggest that Bill Clinton is currently the favorite. Paul Tsongas isn't really familiar yet. Many people still call him Paul Tsongas. But he's making headway. As for the issues, Vicki and Byron Fry live in Euless, Texas. He's the assistant fire chief, and she manages a convenience store. She and her husband worry about crime and growing children.
The answer to crime is education. One of the big solutions to the problem is we're going to have to get the families back together as families.
Yeah, right.
John Price worries about health care.
We need to look at the possibility of a national health care program because health care is so expensive, people can't afford it anymore.
Linda Price believes that money is the root of many problems.
I think if we could get the national debt under control, that a lot of other things would solve itself.
And they do, after all, have something in common with New Hampshire. A nagging concern that however much they care about any particular issue, the politicians may not be able to deliver.
I have yet seen anybody really take a stance on what they believe is right. They're too busy attacking each other and pulling each other's hair rather than attacking the issues. I don't know, you get frustrated after a while.
A little later, we'll look at how the primary debate can change a whole campaign. On the American agenda tonight, the struggle to teach blacks about AIDS prevention. And in a moment, Diane Sawyer will have the rest of the day's news from New York.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Ralston Purina Company.
If you buy dry dog food, there's something you should know. They're pretty much the same. Right, Jake? Most of them start with ground corn as the #1 ingredient, even a fancy brand like Science Diet. But Purina One Dog formula is different because it starts with chicken. Chicken, corn, wheat, and other wholesome ingredients provide high-quality nutrition and a naturally good taste dogs love. To me, Purina One is the only one.
Purina One, second to none.
Don't get hit by an annual fee. Carry the card that doesn't charge one. And keep yourself out of the hole. It pays to discover.
There's constipation and there's constipation. Oh, yeah. When it's this bad, take it to the max. New Maximum Relief Formula Ex-Lax pills with 50% more Ex-Lax medicine for maximum relief. Oh, yeah. Take it to the max.
There are still further indications today that the economy may be perking up. The latest evidence comes from the nation's big retail stores. After a dismal Christmas season, there are signs that the shoppers are coming back. Here's our economics editor, Stephen Ogg.
Kmart shop, would you like to buy here?
At Kmart, there was a surprising spurt in sales of home electronics. Overall, Kmart sales last month were up more than 4% from a year ago. At Sears Roebuck, where sales soared nearly 9%, they're selling more appliances. At Walmart, the nation's biggest retailer, sales shot up 20%. Even though chain store sales were higher for the second month in a row, retail observers are still cautious.
The consumer is scooping up value items and is buying just those things that they need. The necessities are selling.
Analysts are cautious because this year's sales are compared with a year ago, when consumers were preoccupied with the Persian Gulf War and retail sales were terrible. And the ABC News Money Magazine Consumer Confidence Survey continues to show that Americans are worried about the economy, their personal finances, and their own jobs. But if retail sales continue to rise, so should consumer confidence. Stephen Ogg, ABC News, Washington.
For a lot of Americans, though, it will take a long time for confidence to return. A record 13.5 million Americans are now on welfare. That's 2 million more than when the recession began nearly 2 years ago. On Wall Street, some nervousness in advance of tomorrow's unemployment figures. The Dow Jones Industrials lost 27 points today to close at 3241. The trading was heavy. In a Milwaukee courtroom today, real war overseas, was compared to the kind of battle for survival that goes on every day here at home in the nation's violent inner cities. A teenager is on trial for murder. The defense is unique. Here's ABC's Jim Hickey.
17-year-old Felicia Morgan is accused of shooting to death another 17-year-old girl while stealing her leather coat. Felicia's attorney argues that the teenager suffers from what is called post-traumatic stress disorder.
People like Felicia Morgan become sick by what surrounds them, and it's a real mental illness. And it's not an excuse, and it's not a fake.
His Democratic Party, the former two-term governor, member of a political family, this man, an outsider.
Even to say outsider in reference to somebody who's been governor for 8 years, whose father was governor, whose sister was the elected treasurer, I'm not an outsider in the sense of of who I've been and who I am, but rather my commitment is to the unrepresented.
Ironically, this protest candidate brags about his years in office.
I've come with experience. Most of you know I was the governor in California after Reagan.
After wandering the world on a spiritual quest, Brown is back, now flying charter planes, but still outspent 3-1 by Bill Clinton and Paul Tsongas, hammering the competition for taking $1,000 checks.
They have allowed themselves to be trapped and in some cases corrupted by the powerful forces of greed.
In campaign debates, he's like a TV preacher, soliciting money through his 800 number at every chance.
Let them join this campaign through the number 1-800-426.
Jerry Brown hopes to hold his shoestring campaign together through the primary's grand finale this June, and that's in Brown's home state of California, which could leave him with real leverage going into the Democratic convention if he does well there. One of the hot-button issues for all the candidates this year is welfare reform, and a report today says there are more than 13 million Americans now on welfare. That's 2 million more than when this recession began.
Risk. As hard as it is to live with, it's impossible to live without. At Merrill Lynch, we know that risk can be dealt with. It can be managed. It can even be turned to your advantage. To do that, you need a partner. A partner who understands it and can help you turn a world of risk into a world of opportunity. Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on the future.
Imagine a rent-a-car company that offers special delivery right to your door. That's Enterprise.
Here, let me help you.
Enterprise, a special rent-a-car company that gives you special delivery.
Doctor.
Is it right for me?
Habitrol. It's a patch. Well, you know, the patch.
Habitrol.
Habitrol.
You know, Habitrol. It's a patch.
It's new.
Habitrol.
Ask your doctor about Habitrol, nicotine transdermal system.
Thanks, doctor.
Rebate. Now's the best time to buy built-to-last appliances from Frigidaire, because you'll find rock-solid rebates on refrigerators, washers, ranges, and more. So why not hop on over to your Frigidaire dealer and pick up something new for your pet?
Polyshades by Minwax. It's a stroke of genius. Polyshades is rich stain and polyurethane protection in one. Polyshades gives wood a beautiful protective finish in half the time. Polyshades by Minwax.
On Capitol Hill today, a lot of nervous congressmen. Remember the scandal at the private bank of the House of Representatives where it turned out members had bounced thousands of checks? Well, today, the House Ethics Committee made its recommendations on what to do with the worst offenders. Here's ABC's Cokie Roberts.
The Ethics Committee recommended a politically terrifying punishment for the worst abusers of banking privileges, telling the public who they are.
Public disclosure for elected officials in these cases will be a significant
year, and I won't finance it with increasing the deficit. Instead, we will ask those earning over $200,000 a year to pay some more.
Economists say that wins votes, but doesn't really help the economy. Those same economists give Clinton high grades for much of the rest of his economic program. Things like a 50% cut in the capital gains tax for long-term investments in new businesses that create jobs in America. More government research money for development of new products instead of military equipment. Defense spending to be reduced by 36% over the next 5 years. But Clinton also offers a slew of expensive goodies for almost every voting group.
I want to spend more money on people, on education and training and child care. I'm tired of people being told they're too rich to get college aid. I think I've got a record second to none in helping farmers. We're going to have to provide a basic, fundamental health care package to all Americans.
Clinton is quite specific about his spending programs, but the funding is something else.
Where is the money going to come from for many of the things that you talk about in your economic program?
Well, first of all, if you look at the way we did raise taxes in Arkansas, I think that's the way the American people want them raised. If we raised taxes, we dedicated the taxes and we paid for an investment in the future so the people got their money's worth.
As governor of Arkansas, Clinton raised taxes on gasoline and cigarettes and presided over a general sales tax increase. Now he's promising to cut taxes and use money from the defense budget.
By the 5th year of my defense cuts, we'll have a $90 billion a year peace dividend.
A lot of analysts say that big a cut is unlikely, and even if the entire defense budget were eliminated, it would just about cover the annual budget deficit. But Clinton says it can all be worked out, and that someone has to start looking out for the middle class. Mike Jensen, NBC News, Macon, Georgia.
And when Nightly News continues in a moment, a government call for more painkillers for patients who undergo surgery in this country.
Discovered a flaw in eggs. They're extremely high in cholesterol, and a diet high in cholesterol and fat can contribute to the risk of heart disease. Nutritionists at Fleischmann's have found a way to overcome this flaw with Fleischmann's Egg Beaters, the only one that's 99% real egg with zero cholesterol and zero saturated fat. Next time you love an egg, crack open a carton. Fleischmann's Egg Beaters, the great tasting egg without a flaw.
Now during deer season, John Deere's annual sale. You can get up to $400 off on lawn and garden tractors, or up to $150 off on one of our riding mowers, or up to $80 off on one of our mulching mowers. With 36 different mowers to choose from, there's no lawn too large or too small for a John Deere, even if some are a little hard to get to.
We've put the AIDS crisis on the American agenda tonight again. You'll recall that the first group in the U.S. to be devastated by AIDS was the community of gay white men, largely because of all the energy they've put into teaching people about safe sex. The spread of AIDS among this group is now leveled off, but not so among America's blacks and Hispanics. They now make up half of all the AIDS victims in America. Healthcare officials know that prevention pays off, but getting the money to pay for it is increasingly difficult. Our agenda reporter is George Strait.
Wherever it is that you most frequently have sex, have lubricant and condoms nearby. Not like this, oh, wait a minute, I gotta go upstairs and get the condoms. Don't move.
Curtis Wadlington is trying to save lives.
This and this.
Ruth Rosario is trying to save lives too.
If he prefers a condom that is bigger, hey, so be it. Long as he wears it, it's fine.
Yes, ma'am. I was tested in December, negative, but they said to come back in 6 months. Why is that?
This is Philadelphia's largest AIDS education and prevention organization, Babashi, Blacks Educating Blacks About Sexual Health Issues. It was founded 6 years ago by Rashida Hassan.
We really can take care of ourselves. That's what Babashi stands for.
Babashi goes to housing projects, playgrounds, and schools with very explicit and direct warnings about the epidemic which is taking hold in these communities.
Thousands of African Americans, particularly thousands of Hispanics, are going to die from AIDS because we weren't able to start soon enough. It wasn't recognized early enough, and targeted information didn't get to people soon enough.
Just as Babashi and 27 other community organizations around the country were getting people to listen to their messages, trouble, federal budget cuts. Babashi lost almost half of its federal funding last year when Congress took $25 million from AIDS prevention programs and used it to fund AIDS treatment programs.
This is a disaster.
Dr. Marla Gold is in charge of Philadelphia's AIDS treatment and prevention programs.
Without prevention activities going unchecked, we will only be left to just bolster up our health centers and get ready for the sick and the dying that are going to be brought in by the droves.
Well, I'll give you a prescription for that, and you'll probably have to come tomorrow morning.
The extra money for treatment does mean AIDS patients like Jesse and Carlos will be able to get the care they need. But with the total budget for AIDS so limited, it means prevention programs will suffer.
These cuts are really part of the destruction of the community.
Many activists argue not enough money is being spent to fight the AIDS epidemic. The Centers for Disease Control says Congress is short-sighted in the way it is spending those limited funds.
I think it would be a mistake to divert funds away from prevention toward care. We need to be able to deal with both.
Why do you think that there has been this transfer of money?
You have to ask them.
Ohio Congressman Louis Stokes is on the committee that initially recommended the transfer of funds.
It is. It's much easier to just take the easy approach, which is treatment.
Easy, Stokes says, because a new treatment facility is tangible, but prevention programs are controversial.
It's talking about sex, it's talking about drugs. It means talking about things that fundamentally make politicians uncomfortable.
Many black Americans say AIDS has made black politicians so uncomfortable, they have ignored the public health emergency in their districts. The first time the Congressional Black Caucus officially expressed concern about the AIDS epidemic was in this letter to the CDC just 4 months ago.
We have now had a couple of the sessions of our Health Brain Trust that were devoted to the AIDS problem, and they've been fairly recent. They have been fairly recent. This epidemic has been around for 10 years. Yeah, that's true.
Without more money for prevention, these children and many others will be at even greater risk.
At the 10th year reunion, somebody in the crowd is going to have HIV infection and some will have died from AIDS. Because some of them will have got the information too late.
Too late because Congress is forcing communities to make a choice many believe is unfair, both to those with AIDS and to those at risk. George Strait, ABC News, Philadelphia.
And that's our American Agenda for tonight. Peter?
Thank you, Diane. We'll be back in a moment with political moments to remember, unless you were on the wrong end of the moment.
Introducing the new Ford Taurus and the ear. Its new design pleases the eye, but to please the ear, we quieted the engine, the interior, even the air conditioning. So now the idea of driving one will sound even better.
Ace Best Buys are easy to find. They're great values like these.
This Rubbermaid 32-gallon wheel trash container is only $9.77, and Simple Green cleaning solution with free scrubber is just $6.88.
Ace Best Buys. Another reason Ace is the place for you.
New American cuisine from the menu? I love it. Le white meat, le muffin, le glazes, le spice, le style, le smile, le salsa with rice, le tangy, le trendy, le let me suggest. New American cuisine, le menu, le best. Le great combinations, le grilled with le care, le new way of eating with savoir-faire. Le turkey, le sirloin, woo, I'm I'm impressed. New American cuisine, le menu, le best. Ooh.
This is regular. This is better. This Bayer is regular, but for headaches, Anacin is better. This is regular. This is better. This Bufferin is regular, but for headaches, Anacin is better. What makes Anacin better? It's simple. Regular Bayer and Bufferin have one ingredient for pain, but Anacin has two ingredients, an effective pain medicine plus a second ingredient that makes Anacin work better. For headache relief, get Anacin. Get better.
Shot down over Iraq, captured by Bedouins, sold to the enemy.
I am Major Jeffrey Tice, an American.
Hear this pilot's incredible story and exclusive pictures on Primetime tonight.
Finally here this evening, just the right phrase. As there is with any occasion that brings competing politicians together at the presidential level, many of us are wondering whether there will be a moment during the debate later this evening which we will long remember. It isn't always the case, but when it happens, it can change a whole campaign. Here's Jeff Greenfield.
In the past, primary debates have led to some remarkable attempts by candidates to set themselves apart. In 1972, unknown Democratic candidate Ed Cole produced this memorable photo opportunity.
And until we do something about the rat in America, then I think politics in 1972 is going to be meaningless.
More successful was Ronald Reagan's now classic line just before a key 1980 debate, the only line anyone ever remembered.
I am paying for this microphone.
More often, though, primary candidates will try to define their opponents, sometimes causing lasting injury. In 1972, just before the critical California primary, Hubert Humphrey charged that George McGovern wanted to cut the muscle out of the defense budget. In the fall, the Republicans used those words against McGovern. In 1984, the sudden emergence of Gary Hart as the frontrunner with new ideas led Walter Mondale to borrow a line from a well-known TV commercial.
When I hear your new ideas, I'm reminded of that ad, "Where's the beef?"
Yeah. That debate attack set the tone for Mondale's ad campaign against Hart, painting him as a man whose experience could not be trusted in a crisis.
Vote like our world is at stake.
This year, the Democrats began their debate season peacefully. But as the stakes grew higher, so did the temperature.
No one can argue with you, Paul. You're always perfect. I'm not perfect, but I'm honest.
Ronald Reagan used to talk about the 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of any fellow Republican. The more appropriate slogan for today's primary debaters comes from Harry Truman. If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. Jeff Greenfield, ABC News, New York.
Later this evening, when Nightline is usually seen, the last Democratic debate before Super Tuesday. We hope you'll join us right after your late local news, 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central. I'm Peter Jennings. Good evening from Dallas.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Thursday, Colombo goes behind the scenes with television's most wanted crime fighter.
But I thought there was something fishy here. Poisoned. He was murdered, all right.
George Hamilton guest stars with Peter Falk in Caution, Murder Can Be Hazardous to Your Health.
Still waiting? Still watching for that little envelope from your Uncle Sam? If your tax refund is still in the mail, Big Sur has some great news. No payments and no interest for 6 months. Choose the comfort of the Barrington with matching dresser and hutch for just $5.49.